With Skull and Bones being set in a similar timeline to Assassin's Creed Black Flag, there may be a chance we see some familiar faces making a guest appearance. In today's video, we're going to take a deeper look at the timeline for both games to see who, if anyone, could appear in Skull and Bones right after this. Hey everyone, Sam here, and since Skull and Bones has been delayed again, it's giving me a little bit more time to dive into some theories and ideas I've been cooking up regarding the game. It's not uncommon for Ubisoft to cross over some of their game titles, or to clarify whether they exist in the same world or not. For instance, we know that the world and timelines of Assassin's Creed, Watch Dogs, and Far Cry are all linked. We also know that the Clancyverse is all linked too. There was also a crossover between For Honor and the Rabbids universe, but I don't think we're meant to really count that one as canon. In essence, it's not uncommon for Ubisoft to feature characters from one franchise in another, and given the fact that a lot of the characters in the Assassin's Creed titles are based on historical figures, joined with the fact that Skull and Bones is based upon a historically accurate period of time, it's not too much of a stretch to believe that we may see some crossover. We know that Skull and Bones will take place in the early to mid 18th century thanks to the initial announcement trailer at E3 2017, which started off by showing that the year was 1721. Now from that, we know about most of the pirates we met in Assassin's Creed Black Flag. Most of them were still gallivanting around in the Caribbean at this time. You see, Charles Vane was executed on the 29th of March 1721 in Port Royal, and Edward Teach, also known as Blackbeard, had been killed in action in 1718 in North Carolina. Many other pirates like Jack Rackham and Anne Bonny weren't far behind them in meeting an untimely end. But what about Edward Kenway, the main protagonist of Assassin's Creed Black Flag? Well, in 1721, Edward Kenway was still fighting in the Caribbean. By 1725, Kenway had returned home to England, married, and settled down in London. He would shortly thereafter lead the London Assassins, and there's no record of him returning to sea or heading out to the Indian Ocean. There are, however, two other characters from the Black Flag timeline who did: Olivier Levasseur and Bartholomew Roberts. Levasseur, also known as Labouze, has actually been seen in Skull and Bones in the E3 2018 gameplay, where we're tasked with hunting him. He's equally featured in the Assassin's Creed universe in the mobile game Assassin's Creed Pirates. Now, I've actually created a video going through Levasseur's history and the mark he left in the Indian Ocean. It's linked in the cards on the top right of your screen. In Assassin's Creed lore, Labouze was responsible for hiding a fragment of Eden, just a part of Labouze's famous treasure hoard. Labouze died in 1730 at Saint Denis on Reunion Island just east of Madagascar, and with that it's almost certain that we'll see this famous pirate in Skull and Bones. The second pirate is Bartholomew Roberts, also known as Black Bart. Now, Roberts is regarded as many as being the most successful pirate of the golden age of piracy based on how many ships he took and the amount of goods he stole. When Roberts died, many historians consider that point to be when the golden age of piracy truly ended. In Assassin's Creed lore, Roberts is actually a sage, which are seen as being human reincarnations of Ita, the Isu scientist who was the husband of Juno. Ida oversaw pieces of Eden and equally created the observatory on an island that came to be known as Jamaica. It's for this reason that we meet him in Assassin's Creed Black Flag. By 1721, Black Bart had travelled to West Africa to pillage and plunder there. Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Ouida were all locations on the west coast of Africa that he was notably active in. He died in 1722 at Cape Lopez after being struck in the neck by grape shot. Now, while we don't have official record of Roberts travelling to the east coast of Africa into the Indian Ocean to pillage and plunder there, it might not be too much of a stretch of the imagination to assume that we may see Black Bart, or at least a mention of him, in the game given how far his fame and influence stretched. Are we likely going to see Edward Kenway on our ships and in our ports in Skull and Bones? It's not very likely, but that doesn't mean that the lore of Assassin's Creed and that of Skull and Bones can't collide. We're just going to have to wait and see what the developers do with the storyline and world of the game as we get closer to the game's release. Until then though, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend it here on my channel. Have a great week, and feel free to subscribe for more videos.